Well, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the opening session on the global policy issues connected with AI. We're all aware that AI has exploded and the technology is evolving very rapidly, and I think this has led to a lot of optimism, but also some concerns about the way in which AI might be regulated and what is necessary. We at universities realize this a lot because I had to run all my midterm exams through an AI recognition program just a few weeks ago. So it's something that's very front and center. The UK government a couple of months ago had a conference at Bletchley where Alan Turing did his famous work trying to get ahead of this issue, and it was called an AI Safety Summit. So this is an important global challenge, and we have three distinguished speakers here to help us navigate through these uncharted waters. To my left is Dwayne Allen. He's the Chief Technology Officer and Senior VP at Unisys and also a GW graduate. Please welcome him. Thank you. Next is Kalyan Krishnamurthy, who is the CEO of Flipkart. And if you don't know what Flipkart is, he will tell you. Welcome, Kalyan.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Tiffany Moore, who's the Senior Vice President for Political and Industry Affairs at the Consumer Technology Association. So she's got a great overview of the entire issue. Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we don't have a lot of time, so my plan is the following. I'm going to ask each of our three speakers to speak for 5 to 7 minutes on how they see AI evolving in their particular industry or sector, what changes they've noticed, and what concerns they might have, or how they're using AI or plan to use it in the next 5 years, and how they see developments in that space. And then I'm going to ask them a few questions which have not been pre-arranged, so I'll put them on the spot. And every now and then, if you send a question in, I'll see if I can weave it into our conversation. So Dwayne, may I start with you?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's really exciting to be here this morning. As he mentioned, I'm Dwayne Allen. I'm CTO of Unisys. For those of you not familiar, Unisys is a global IT services company. We have several billion in revenue. We do business in 800 clients and doing business in about 45 countries. So it's a global company. So AI is a very important topic for us. I'll talk a little bit about AI and I'll come back to Unisys. So first of all, if you think about AI, it's really not new. We've been doing it for quite some time. In fact, I did some research in the term artificial intelligence was first coined almost 65 years ago. You experience in your personal life, from its suggestions in Amazon to Netflix and so forth. Banks, a lot of people have been using AI for quite some time to target clients and so forth, sales opportunities. It's really taken off in the last, I'd say, 18 months because of generative AI. I called it the generative AI apocalypse. And what's interesting about that is it really introduces a new element because generative AI introduces a continuous cycle. In the old days, you developed your algorithms and your routines, you pushed the data through it, you developed your test scripts, you had expected results, you checked them off and you were done. But with this new aspect of generative AI, the processing continues and the output of one cycle becomes the input of the next cycle. So now you got to continue to monitor and learn. Otherwise, you might think you're aiming this way, but over time it starts to move slightly, so you got to keep monitoring it. So that's what's going on. I think it just presents a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of fear, but I think there's more opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. What's interesting is a lot of companies have made some big investments. If you think about what Accenture's doing, Amazon, $10 billion. What's interesting is adoption's moving a little slower. So now let me get to a little bit about what's going on at Unisys. I'd say we have a fully comprehensive approach to what we're doing with AI. It starts at the top with our CEO, who is very interested in this. This is his number one topic. I myself have done several presentations to our board. So at the top of the company, we've got this intense focus and support and interest in AI. And if you think about the approach with which we're pursuing it inside the company, there's a couple of elements. One is client solutions and new client opportunities. So one, we've been using AI for quite some time. We're adding some analytics and processing on top of that to make that better. We're looking at new to go-to-market opportunities because in some cases, our clients don't 100% know what they want. So that presents an advisory and consulting opportunity. We're also using it internally. What's that phrase, drink your own champagne or eat your own dog food? So you don't have a lot of credibility if you're talking about things you're doing with AI for your clients and someone says, what are you doing for yourself? And we say not much. So we're driving a lot of internal improvement in marketing and finance and HR and marketing and sales and so forth. We also have a comprehensive training curriculum. So we've got 5 persona families with curated curriculum tailored to every job in the company. So we want to make sure everyone's getting trained on it, and the job tailors to your job, whether it's go-to-market, sales, or if you're a technical person. And then finally, there's the element of ethics and compliance and environmental monitoring and monitoring the environment, because you have to make sure you're using this in an ethical manner, even with good intentions. And then that leads to feeding our communications and marketing organizations so we continue to tell our story. And then obviously investor relations, because investors and analysts want to know 2 things. They want to know what you're doing for your clients and what are you doing for yourself. So if I were to summarize it, that's the comprehensive approach we have at Unisys, and we're pursuing it in just about every industry you can imagine, from financial services to manufacturing to pharma, and I might have a chance to share some examples later. But that would be the quick summary. It's a pretty comprehensive approach. We think it's a tremendous opportunity. We're excited about it. We're helping a lot of our clients. They seem to be appreciative that we're approaching them in a manner where we're trying to help, not just sell them things. But I'll stop there because I want to make sure I give my colleagues here a chance to talk, and hopefully we'll get more into it in conversation.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. Colleen, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Before I talk about Flipkart, I'll just introduce Flipkart in a couple of minutes, but before that, I want to talk a bit about India. Of course, all of you are familiar with India, but I want to share some aspects of India which is less spoken before. India has about, let's say, 1.4 billion people. Maybe less than 1 billion people have internet connections. I'll just talk about the diversity of the country, which is something which is less known. There are roughly 4 to 5 customer segments from an income standpoint. And if you just look at countries like the United States or some other European countries, consumption happens mostly in the coastal parts of the country. 50 to 60% of consumption happens just in the coastal part of the country. In case of India, it happens across the country, length and breadth of the country. It's a very, very spread out country. We have about 22 languages spoken in the country with 700 dialects, more than 30 states across the country. So this is what roughly one aspect of India is, extremely diverse. Flipkart, the company I work for, is actually quite similar. It's a very diverse company. I'll just talk about what we do. We are an e-commerce marketplace, a product marketplace. We have roughly 600 million users who come on the platform. We have about 240 million products listed on the platform. And these products are listed by about 1.4, 1.5 million merchants, small merchants across the country. These are family-owned merchants mostly. If you just look at an average merchant, they'll have 30 to 40 employees. A lot of them are family members. We cater to customers across maybe every small town, small village in the country. We have our own supply chain operations. We employ anywhere between 250,000 to 300,000 people in our supply chain. And they deliver to about 24,000 zip codes, pin codes, we call it in India, pin codes in the country, across the length and breadth of the country. India generally has been a very, very technology-forward country. One concept which has been spoken about less, even as AI gets evolved, my colleague here, Dwayne, said that it's a 60-year-old concept. And actually, even at Flipkart, we have been applying our AI applications maybe 6 to 7 years now across every aspect of Flipkart. Customer discovery, personalization. Second thing is for the merchant, making their cost structure much leaner, making them easy to get their products up on the platform, and our supply chain. Most important in a supply chain operation is how do you make sure that you touch the products minimum? right? That's when the cost gets added, that's when wastage increases, all of those. So we use a lot of technology for that. And of course, business process. Coming back to the concept which has been spoken minimum in technology in the last several years as it's developed is inclusion in technology. I just gave you the diversity of the country, diversity of Flipkart also. But when we develop technology, it's fairly homogeneous. We do not develop technology the way it's consumed. So my biggest hope, and I think we should all participate, not just hope, I think we should all make it happen together, is how do we make technology more inclusive, more diverse, more personalized. The concept of personalization in the context of what I shared before is how do you make sure that the right of the 250 million product listings, and on the one side you have 600 million users, how do you match them the best in the most relevant and the most personalized fashion? That is the biggest objective for us from a technology point of view, and I think that is what will truly democratize technology, revolutionize technology. That's the way I think the role of AI has to develop in the next few years. I think if we all are able to get to that in the next few years, next maybe even 10 years, it's a huge win for all of us. That's the way I think about it.
Thank you very much, Kalyan. Very informative. Tiffany, may we turn to you?
Yes. So I'm with the Consumer Technology Association, and we represent about 1,300 companies within the entire tech ecosystem. And so if you think about it, every aspect of AI, whether it's from the developer to the deployer, we're mostly on the deployer side, but what you'll find is with our member companies is that every company is a tech company, and particularly when you're thinking about AI. And so we have kind of traditional electronics companies that are members, but also car companies and John Deere, because every company is using technology and particularly artificial intelligence. We consider artificial intelligence as ingredient technology. Every company will be using it. It's just a matter of how, whether it's internally or externally and consumer facing. We approach it by making sure that our companies, large and small, 80% of our companies are actually small businesses and startups, but everyone is looking at how they're using AI. And so as an association, we approach it from an advocacy standpoint. I'll talk a little bit more later about our national AI framework to make sure we're all on the same page. We have the same definitions. That leads me to what we do. We're also a standard setting organization. So we're developing standards in AI to make sure, again, that we're consistent in our terminology and our definitions and understand it. We have a collective understanding. But we also look at it from a research perspective. We often do research about how consumers are looking at artificial intelligence. Do they fear it? Are they embracing it? And what we found is that consumers are interested. Consumers don't understand that they have been using artificial intelligence for so many years. But to Dwayne's point, generative AI is kind of what's really going to put a focus. And I'm a huge early adopter. I know some folks are trying to figure out how to use it. But we understand that it is going to change everything. It is transformative. And so we need to make sure that we're ahead of the curve, and that's how our advocacy is developed. One of the things that I love about CTA is that we get to see all of the fruits of our efforts and the work that we do to advance innovation at a show called CES that we own and produce. And so at CES this January, AI was the buzzword. I mean, I don't think there was a company that wasn't talking about how they were using artificial intelligence. And it kind of, like I mentioned, the entire ecosystem when it comes to AI, whether it's the chips, which is the brain of AI, the actual hardware. We have our companies like Microsoft who changed their keyboard for the first time in at least 2 decades for Copilot. You see it in smart home. You see it particularly in healthcare. There's so many aspects where we will see this technology improve lives, improve efficiency, and then make our products that we love smarter and better We talk a lot about smart home and kind of smart products, but it will make your products much more intelligent. It'll make them more responsive to your individual needs. We had companies like L'Oreal who keynoted at CES that talked about how they're using AI to analyze your face so that they can determine, like, is there a spot? Should you go to a dermatologist? So again, there's so many ways in which companies will be using AI, and again, it's horizontal technology, ingredient technology that every organization, both internally and externally, if they're consumer facing, will be using. And so it's about how do we create those guardrails to make sure that artificial intelligence is used in its best and highest purpose, and then how are we working with governments to ensure that, one, there are guardrails, but also that we're appreciating that there are some things that there's some risk profiles. Depending on what you're doing, your risk profile for data is very different. And so that's one of the things that we saw in President Biden's executive order, where it tasked each department the risk profile to make a recommendation on what national park you should visit, low risk. But the data that the Department of Health and Human Services is using, very different risk profile. And so those regulations, how we approach it, has to be different. And so that's one of the things that we appreciated about seeing in the executive order. But it's not something that we can ignore. It's like gravity, and so we do so at our own peril. So again, it's about making sure that we're using it for its best and highest purpose. Thanks.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for setting the stage for what we hope in the next 23 minutes will be a good conversation. So let me pick up on the last point about the guardrails and regulation, because this is an issue where surveys show that the average American is somewhat concerned. So obviously, David Rubenstein's example of health, you can't argue with that, but there are other uses of AI. So Dwayne, I want to start with you because your company operates in so many different markets. Regulations are different. The EU has its own code of conduct. You talked about President Biden's approach to this. Then we have countries that maybe have no approach to this or have a very laissez-faire attitude towards it. But obviously, it crosses borders. So how do you see the regulatory environment, and how do you see the need for some sort of consistency across various markets?
Well, I think the regulatory environment is essential. I mean, you're going to need regulations, you're going to need boundaries and so forth. It's the global aspect that makes it tricky, because I frequently say global sounds glamorous till you have to do it. So AI can give you all these opportunities to, as laws change, particularly in some countries, we talked earlier about Brazil, very complicated tax structure. Sometimes you got to use 2 different tax softwares. India, sometimes some of the regulations and so forth. So as they change, AI gives you this opportunity to assess them and determine an approach going forward. However, you still have to be cautious and think about testing and validating, because if you get it wrong, there's likely going to be a penalty or fine, something in the paper and so forth. Yeah. So that's why earlier when I talked about the apocalypse, as I called it, early on when ChatGPT came on the scene, it was wonderful because you were scanning a bunch of words, it didn't take any instruction, you typed natural language and you're off and running. Now that we're doing things that are more complicated, that require calculations, things like health and prescriptions, important decisions, that's where the regulatory environment, I think, proves helpful and informative. And with us, we've even moved with our legal department to have an acceptable use policy, so that as we get this information aggregated, we still make sure if it's a critical decision, it's made by a human being. We want to feed them with better information, but we don't want AI just to go off and make the decision and miss possibly interpreting the regulation. So I think it's really important. So with a global company, I think David talked about continuous learning in his earlier speech. That's exactly what it's going to be. If you're in a global environment, interpreting those regulations is going to be ongoing. And it's both an opportunity and a challenge, but I lean towards opportunity.
Okay. Well, you're the IT guy, so you should. Let me skip and come back to you, Tiffany, on this, because just take the EU and the US. Different views on regulation. An outside observer would say the EU is much more concerned with regulating, and the US is much more concerned with innovating. So in this space where you have this balance between innovation and trust, between innovation and regulation, where even some of the market participants in AI are raising alarm bells that, not enough is being done. How do you see the right balance, and how do you see the U.S. versus other producers of AI?
Well, I'll say that every country should be looking at kind of what their AI policies are for their best purposes, and countries really need to figure out its uses. The United States particularly, I think that we, while it was incredibly helpful to have President Biden's executive order, there's nothing like Congress putting kind of finality as to what our approach will be, and we see it as a competitiveness issue. It's no surprise that kind of the largest, best tech companies have been founded in the United States and not so much in Europe, because we believe that their policies are a little bit more restrictive. And so you referenced EU, they have the AI Act, and while it seeks to put guardrails, there is some challenges for businesses that they have to prove that their large language model or AI, that it can absolutely not do anything wrong. And I think that's a challenge for companies to have to try to prove that. I do think the U.S. approach, if we continue down the current path, is we would make recommendations, and what we did in our national AI framework was to say we need guardrails. We need to make sure that smaller players are able to participate, so it's just not the larger companies that are able to play ball. We also believe that we should go after actual harm and not perceived harm. I do think that in the media there's a parade of horribles when it comes to artificial intelligence, and I think Dr. Perry mentioned earlier, you've seen the movies, and so you're always concerned about the AI that's coming to get you. And I think that most people are kind of again, consumers don't understand that they've been using it for so long, and so now it's about education. I think it's a responsibility of all of our industries to make sure that consumers understand how it's being used, how their data is being used, and ensuring that there's no bias or no concerns. And so, again, with our national AI framework, we try to put those pieces together. One of the things that we have to make sure that we're doing is allowing innovation, though. If we are too restrictive, we are going to prevent these industries from flourishing. We will cut ourselves out of a global environment in which this will be the standard. And I mean, I would suggest that we're talking about artificial intelligence now, but it won't even, probably in about 5 or 10 years, we won't even say AI. It'll just be, again, ingredient technology. It'll be used in everything. I remember when Internet of Things was the buzzword, but now it's just consistent with how every company and organization is using it. And so we do need to develop our comfort level. I think one of the things that's important in the United States, particularly when it's concerns about how data is being used, that we need a national privacy law. I think that would give comfort to consumers. That's something that we've advocated for several years, and that's baseline, foundational, that's important when you build upon it with AI or quantum or other technologies. And so to the extent that we can pass a national privacy law, that will allow consumers to feel better about their data. And then as we build upon it, again, to make sure that we are creating guardrails but not impediments, and that we provide the opportunity for companies to flourish.
Okay, thank you. Kellyanne, let me ask you about how you see the regulatory environment perhaps in India. Is there anything that you've heard about what's happening in the US or the EU that would lead you to believe that India is a bit behind the curve? Because technologically India is ahead. The question is, on the regulatory and data management side, where do you see India?
To be fair, regulators, this is an extremely challenging job for regulators, number one. Number two, they have to very deeply partner with all the technology providers. I'll just borrow from Tiffany's words as well. AI is not a product. It's an evolution of a particular technology, which augments human intelligence in some way. The way this technology can be applied in emerging markets specifically, let's say in the financial sector, to look at the credit worthiness of individuals versus in the healthcare sector, let's say to evaluate counterfeit drugs, which tends to be problems in many countries. These are all very, very different types of applications of AI. I don't even know if there is a common thread to all of these which can be easily regulated. It's a very complex topic. It's going to take a few years to get there. And to your specific question, I think India is also in that journey of evolving in this journey right now.
Fine, thank you very much. So, Kalyan, I'm going to start again with you because you mentioned making AI more inclusive. And so there's obviously always a concern about inequality. Whenever you have a new technology, it can be job displacing, it can require retraining, whatever. India has a lot of poor people, but it also has made some advances in the digital space. I mean, people can get their transfer payments online. In what ways do you think that India can provide us positive experiences for how to make technology more inclusive?
So, on the previous point of the job displacement piece, I'll just share that if you just look at the country, India has today the biggest weightage of young population, and a lot of people who are getting into colleges, just getting into the workforce. I think this is a time of, the language maybe I would like to use is reskilling and upskilling rather than job displacements. It will happen. The reskilling and the upskilling is going to happen in a pretty big way, but that is progress. That is progress for everybody in the world and progress for a country like India. So it's going to be a very, very positive experience for a country like India.
Excellent. Yeah. Dwayne, yes?
I wanted to comment on that because at times AI becomes the poster child for job displacement. So let me share some context, and I'm going to share my age now. I've worked for 7 companies in 4 different industries under 10 CEOs. I've yet to work for one that's not trying to be more efficient, lower costs, increase profit margins. Never. This is just another vehicle to achieve that. But it's become the big rage because it's AI, it's going to displace jobs. We had the same thing with automation. Years ago, the rage was digital. Digital is going to replace every job. So there are going to be some consequences, as you can imagine. But as the word that made me think about this is when you said progress. Every company tries to get more efficient. They try to lower costs because everyone wants costs to go down. They want the stock to go up. And this is just another vehicle of doing that. One other comment, then I'll turn it back to you. When Tiffany talked about things morphing into the normal vernacular, I say the same thing about digital. 5 years ago, everyone talked digital, digital, digital. So today, do you say, I'm using this digital logistics app to secure some transportation? Or do you say, I called an Uber? Right? Yeah. Right? You don't talk about digital, and it's got digital AI, GPS. It's got all this technology in it. You don't talk about that. That's what's going to happen eventually with this. So, sorry, I'll turn it back over to you.
No, not at all.
But when Tiffany, you said progress, you prompted that. That was perfect.
No, we're on you look at it from your perspective, from the consumer also. So can I throw the same question to you about the job displacement, inequality, inclusivity goal?
I'll take.
You know, this question was much better when you asked it to him. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
I'll make 2 points. When it comes to job displacement, I think, one, artificial intelligence, it's happening. We can't put our head in the sand and we can't ignore it away. And so it's about how do we use it. And I think with any advent of technology, there's been job displacement. You think elevator operators, bank tellers, all of those industries were disrupted, but it's about how do you, to your point, how do you reskill? How do you focus on new skills? One of the things that I find fascinating with generative AI is like prompt engineering. That will be an entire major at some point, maybe here at GW. But I think it's incumbent upon us, not just industry, but governments, to make sure that we are educating our workforce in a way in which they're using these tools. I hope everyone is trying out AI in some respect, whether it's ChatGPT or other generative AI, because it's often been quoted and said, will you lose your job because of AI? No, you'll lose it because of someone who's using AI. And so how are we making sure that we're upskilling our workforce to focus on higher level tasks? I mean, the repetitive tasks, those are some of the things and concerns about automation. So I think it's our responsibility, and it's incumbent on government and industry to make sure that we are maximizing our workforce to take advantage of AI as opposed to fearing it. Your second question was about inclusion and concerns about kind of AI technology and how it's used and how it affects different populations. I think that's something that we should very much be concerned about. I am a Black woman. I would very much want to make sure that any AI that is developed, any large language model, make sure that it doesn't discriminate. But I would also say make sure we're going against actual harm. There are some instances in which, you know, a lot of what we talk about in our national AI framework is you have the developer who's developing the technology in the large language models, and you have the deployer. And so what is that contract between the developer and deployer on how that information is being used? What's the fact pattern? Do we have audits? Those are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're not introducing bias into large language models, but we have to understand that inherently data that's coming in may be biased. So how do you engineer it out? And the one thing I love about innovation is I met an incredible founder yesterday who has a startup that uses AI to make sure that you're not introducing bias into some of the large language models. So there will be technology, just as there's technology to make sure the kids aren't, you know, writing their entire papers on ChatGPT. There is innovation that'll make sure that we are ensuring that there's not bias in some of our systems. So I think the answer to all of these things is technology, and particularly when it comes to the workforce, we need to make sure that we're informing them and educating them on kind of this next journey into careers and the use of AI.
So one of the roles of the moderators is sometimes to push back when the panelists agree too much. And so let me find two areas where I think you all agree, but I'm not sure that it's 100% convincing. So one on the job displacement. Yes, I buy all the stuff about, you know, skills and it's going to happen, but we also have a transition, right? And with any new technology, there's a transition period, and some countries do better with it than others. I worked a lot on South Korea. South Korea is at the forefront of many technologies, but their youth unemployment is 20%. So there's something in the labor market that's not working right. And yes, they should be able to fix it, but they don't. So I wonder if we're being a little optimistic on the displacement side. So I want to throw that at any of you. And the second is on the regulatory side. I hear you all that you know, we need some guardrails, et cetera. But we've also seen in the global, to take your word, the global space, right, the global world, that it's very hard to get agreements, right? We can't get China to agree on debt relief for developing countries. We can't get agreement on climate change. So why should we be so optimistic that we can deal with these regulatory differences among countries? And I come back to the financial sector, Colleen, which you mentioned briefly. You know, regulation is always lagging financial innovation. This is a case where regulation is probably far lagging, you know, the advances in AI. So I have two concerns, and we only have 7 minutes, but you each have a shot at it. And try to convince me, please, that job displacement is not a big deal and that regulation can be managed. Dwayne, we'll start with you.
I'll try to be brief.
You can pick either one.
Well, I'll talk about the job displacement because I picked up on it earlier. Job displacement will occur. I just don't think you should put it all on AI. Because of automation and rote tasks, if it took 10 analysts a certain amount of time to review something, you can do it faster with AI. So you're going to have some of that. But I guess what I'm saying is not so much optimism, but I want to throttle back all the pessimism. It's the end of the world. But I'll stop and give my colleagues time for other.
I'll say, you know, I wouldn't say I'm optimistic. I'm a realist. I mean, I come from a family that worked in the steel mills and the auto industry, and we've seen what happens to that. With increased productivity, you have less workers, and so that helped inform my choice about, you know, the career that I chose. And so I think it is really about making sure that we are ahead of the game. We have a responsibility, and again, I don't think we have the choice to decide if AI is going to take hold. It is like gravity. We don't have a choice. So it is our responsibility to make sure that governments are investing in education, that companies are investing in their workforces. We have a number of companies who are encouraging the use of AI. They're making sure that kind of those dirty tasks or dangerous tasks are done by kind of AI models, and also making work much safer for employees. And so I don't think we have a choice. And so it's not about optimism or pessimism. It's about being rational and making sure that we're doing our best to train and educate our workforce. And on the regulatory part, I'll say I don't think there'll ever be global agreement on anything. But again, it's about what countries take advantage of AI. And there'll have to be some synergies and some standards in some instances. But it's our responsibility, particularly in the U.S., when it comes to competitiveness, that we're taking full advantage.
Kalyan?
Employees are not just employees. There is multiple dimensions to employees. They're also consumers. They have multiple roles to play in the society. AI should be looked at from a point of view, especially in a country like India, from a standard of living and a quality of life point of view. I'll give you a very small example for this one, right? Consumerism is beginning to pick up in a country like India, partly driven by AI. In the last 3 years, just to give you some data point, 80 new beauty brands have been launched in India. Just think about the choice Indian consumers suddenly have. They have more value coming out of the system. They have more selection and more variety of products to buy from. The amount of roads paved in the country in the last 5 years, the number of new airports that have come up in the country, I'm just saying that all of these things will promote jobs. I would not just look at a particular business process and see whether this particular employment is going away to technology, but if you just look at the progress and development of the whole country, it's massive, heavily driven by AI. So I would take a bigger picture like that rather than just job displacement in a particular sphere.
No, it's a very good point. And I think if we look at developing countries more broadly, I think with all technologies, you can look again at the plus and the minus, right? So I think we've seen through technology that distance can be eliminated as a constraint, right? In the service sector, for example. So that's a big plus if you are Rwanda and you're, landlocked. On the other hand, the skill requirements may increase, right? And so this puts a lot of burden on the education systems and other areas. I haven't seen that many questions from the audience, so my suggestion is that since we have 2 minutes left, I ask each of you if there's something that you want to talk about that we haven't covered in this very informative conversation. And I'll give you each 30 seconds to say something, and then I'll wrap it up, because I only get paid if we stop exactly on time.
I'll make it quick then. To me, we've yet to tap the full potential of AI. There's a lot of talk about it redefining how work is done. I think in the end, it might redefine what work is. And as you said, we ought to be along for the ride and participate as much as possible.
Yeah. My suggestion and recommendation here would be for institutions, universities, corporates, don't make AI an initiative. Don't have the head of AI in a company. It has to become a part of the culture of the organization for us to truly understand, embrace it, and look at all the aspects of AI. So that will be my closing comment.
Thank you.
And I would just say, from a U.S. perspective, I think it's important for Congress to pass laws that allow AI to flourish, provide guardrails, but again, give some direction on how it can be used. And I think it's a great opportunity, not just for the private sector to use those tools, but even the government to use it for greater efficiency. So we should embrace it, but we should also make sure that we are protecting and educating our workforce so that they can take full advantage of it as well.
Very sage advice. I think we're all hoping that AI will give us all these benefits and that the risks and costs will be manageable. So I want to thank very much our 3 fantastic panelists. So please join me in thanking them for their insights.